Jonathan Bocher from PlayGuitar.com. Welcome to our little series on following the chords with your solos. It's probably going to be 2 parts, something like that. We're going to be using a very simple little jam track that I just threw together. It is 4 chords. It is B minor for 1 bar, G major for 1 bar, D major for 1 bar, and A major for 1 bar. So on bar 4, on that A, you'll notice I like to do my A's with like a kink bar, kinking my first finger so that kind of, I just find that if I try to do it this way, using all 3 of those fingers, that it's fingers get jammed up on top of each other and bad things happen. So I use my my first finger, and then that frees up these other fingers to do fun little things like that. So you'll hear in bar 4, there is a little bit of that kind of a thing going on. Now, I'll just point out that we're in the key of D major, which means that we can use this B minor scale that starts right here on the B, 5th string, root 5 scale, right? Those notes all come straight out of that root 5 pentatonic minor scale, okay? With the exception of that one note that I just snuck in there. But, so we're using all pentatonic scales here, and our B pentatonic minor, root 5, so that gives us down here if you want it. It gives us up here, which we're definitely going to use. And we're going to use our root 6 B pentatonic minor as well. Oh, and we're also going to be using a little bit of the D pentatonic major as well, root 6. Okay, so those are the scales we're going to be using for our solo. When we're talking about following the chords, what do we mean? Well, in a nutshell, a chord, I'm talking about just major and minor chords here. I'm not talking about more complicated chords, but a major chord and a minor chord is built using just 3 notes. So a triad gives you the notes you need to form a chord. Now, in the context of a solo, if we're trying to produce melody that is really related to the chord progression, those 3 notes, say the chord progression is playing over a G. The 3 notes, G, B, and D, are going to be really instrumental in giving you some melodic stuff to work with, because they're going to tie in so closely to what the rest of the band is playing. And it doesn't mean that you can't use other notes. So anything that you know how to do is still totally valid on the guitar. We're just talking about kind of focusing our attention in the area of these 3 notes, just for that bar, and then we can move elsewhere, right? But it's going to give us a bit of a framework and a foundation to build our riff that kind of pulls all of your riffing kind of over in a very tight place that's very related to what's being played. So hopefully that kind of makes some sense there. I think it'll make a bit more sense as we get into it. So let's do that. Okay, we're going to start off bar 1 over a B minor, right? Well, we've got our B minor, 7th fret, root 6 bar chord here, right? Well, let's just look at the top end of that. There's a B minor right there. There's a triad, right? The 3 notes that you need to produce a B minor. So the first riff is going to be working off of that B minor, and you can strum the whole thing if you want. All 3 strings. I've written it in the tab to be just the 2 strings, and I tend to hybrid pick, which means that I'm using my pick and also some of my fingers. So in this particular case, I'm using my pick. I'm picking down with my pick, and I'm also plucking string number 2 up with my second finger on my right hand, okay? so I can sound them out simultaneously. But if you want to play it like this, or even those two strings with your pick, that's totally valid as well. Okay, so we're going to be, however you choose to do this part of it, then we're going to hammer on with our third finger on the 9th fret, 3rd string. Then there's a brief pause, then we do it again. Right, so, and then we just kind of come back down here. That's a very common move. It's a riff, I guess you could call it a riff. It's just a little phrase, right, that you can throw in all over the place, and it's straight out of that scale. And if you throw in a little vibrato here and there, then it sounds good. So go ahead and do that. So we started by coming off of this B minor triad right here, and then we threw in an E. And that's basically like creating a B sus4 chord, okay? So you see it's still related to the chord here. Oops. Then we come back down here, and then this is the last note of our first bar. Well, what is that note? That is a B. Okay? So again, B, perfectly lined up over top of a B minor chord, right, if you're playing a B note. Now, when we're talking about using triads and the notes within them to kind of, as our framework, then you got to think of what are the important parts of a riff. You might have the first note, because you're establishing something there. It could be that you have a whole bunch of quick little ghost notes, and then your first strong note or your longest note is the one that really helps establish where you are melodically. It could be, the last note is often very important. It could be the highest note that you play. There's a lot of different ways to establish, the strength of a note within a riff. So it's not always just the first note, or, it's not necessarily a set formula. But you got to listen to what notes are really defining that particular riff, and then how are those notes related to the chord? Because you might play a whole bunch of other notes in between, and you could spend all day trying to find relationships, and they're not going to really do you a lot of good. You're really just looking for the core notes to see how they're related, right? And how you can relate your core notes from your riff. Let's move on to bar number 2. And we're over a G chord, right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to slide up, right? We're hanging out here on this 9th fret on the B. Now, that's right at the beginning of the second bar, by the way, right? Now, B works great over top of a G because the 3 notes in your G chord are G, B, and D. Okay, that's your triad, your G major triad. So if we're playing a B, and now the chord progression is moved to a G, that's great. We're playing a major third of where the band is at, right? But we're going to move up here to the 12th fret, which now comes straight out of our G major root 5 bar chord. So you can play that with your second and third fingers, or third and fourth fingers, or the choice is yours. But it's strings 2 and 4 on the 12th fret. Okay. And that lines us up really nicely. You can hear it when we're playing that, how it just kind of brings you along melodically, like, oh yeah, we've shifted chords here, we're in a different place, right? Also, I'll mention that these 2 notes come out of that D major pentatonic pattern, right? There's one of them. There's the other one. And there's the rest of the pattern. So these notes come out of the chord and out of that pattern. Okay, so that's the first 2 bars of our little solo. We're going to cover the next 2 bars in the next section. I don't want to make these lessons too long. If you're watching on YouTube, you can click the link below the video. It'll bring you to PlayGuitar.com. If you're already there, you will find the jam track below this video. You can download that and practice with it. And just have a noodle with it. Practice with it on your own. Remember the chords are B minor, G, D, A. So see what you can do to target that. Just think about your bar chords. Okay, you don't have to worry about, oh, triads, I don't know where triads are, things like that. Just think about your bar chords, the shape of the bar chord, and just try to start using some notes from within there just as a starting point for your riffs. And see where that brings you. And we'll be back in the next lesson to finish this thing off. Have a great day.